Democratic presidential candidate Beto O'Rourke is calling Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu racist for promising to annex Jewish settlements in the occupied West Bank if he is reelected. This is a pledge that Netanyahu is making on the eve of a national election in Israel. And this was O'Rourke's response.
The U.S.-Israel relationship is one of the most important relationships that we have on the planet. And it must be able to transcend a prime minister who is racist, as he warns about Arabs coming to the polls, who wants to defy any prospect for peace as he threatens to annex the West Bank, and who has sided with a far-right racist party in order to maintain his hold on power.
We have Tony Blinken with us. He was the Deputy Secretary of State and Deputy National Security Advisor in the Obama administration. And when you hear Beto O'Rourke speaking like that, it's not what some would say is a nuanced approach to this. What was your reaction?
Look, there's a very big lane between, on the one hand, opposing the policies that Prime Minister Netanyahu adheres to, and going for divestment, sanctions, name-calling. I think what Prime Minister Netanyahu is really an opportunist, because this is the eve of an election, and this is a desperate play to shore up his base. You might use that term, a Hail Mary, exactly, to get his base behind him, to get enough votes so that Likud finishes #1 and he has the right to try to form the next government. He's done this before, these 11th hour, 12th hour efforts to try to swing an election.
When you look at how Democrats are talking about these issues on the campaign trail, using strong language like Beto O'Rourke used, do you worry that that plays into Republicans who are trying to tag Democrats, even with there is some criticism of Israel, to be sure, within the party, but Republicans are trying to tag them as anti-Semitic, trying to conflate some of the criticism of Israel, and some would argue they're effectively doing this with, for instance, Ilhan Omar, the congresswoman who had tweets that trafficked in anti-Semitic tropes, and they're trying to conflate these things. When you see someone like Beto O'Rourke talking in this way, does it play into that?
Look, until recently, Israel has never been a partisan issue. It's always been a bipartisan issue, and I think what we've seen, unfortunately, is Republicans trying to turn it into a partisan issue. The other night, President Trump played into this dual allegiance idea by talking to an American audience of American Jews about your prime minister, Prime Minister Netanyahu. That's the same thing. Where's the criticism of him? What this needs to focus on is policy. And I think what you're seeing in Israel right now with this attempt by Prime Minister Netanyahu to try to pull the election out of a hat, talking about the annexation of the West Bank, that's what we should be focused on. What's the substance of that policy? And the substance is not good. There's a lot of wiggle room in his language, and if he's reelected, he may pull back from it. But his own partners probably have him over a barrel, because if he's reelected, he wants legislation in the Knesset that would prohibit prosecuting a sitting prime minister. He's under 3 indictments. Now, his partners may say, okay, we'll back that bill, but in return, you have to go forward with this idea of annexation of the West Bank. That's a very bad place to be.
The White House is officially announcing that the U.S. is going to designate Iran's Revolutionary Guard as a foreign terrorist organization. This is the first time that the United States has ever named, it's part of another government, to be clear, that they've ever named part of another government as a foreign terrorist organization. What does this do to the relationship with Iran, and is this very problematic or not?
You know, Brianna, successive administrations before this one have designated Iran a state sponsor of terrorism. They've sanctioned individual members of the IRGC. They've gone after companies that the IRGC has been affiliated with. But they've stopped short of actually sanctioning the IRGC itself, which, as you rightly say, is part of the Iranian government. And there's a reason for that. Most previous administrations, including military and intelligence officials, concluded that the gain was not worth what we would risk if we went forward and did that.
What's the risk?
The risk is this. The Iranians have the ability to retaliate against our forces in Iraq and in Syria. They have militia in both countries. They could do that. They could take steps in the Straits of Hormuz. 25% of the world's oil flows through every single day. And when folks looked at the designation of the IRGC itself, it's basically adding a label. It's not actually adding new sanctions. So it doesn't get you much. But what it does get you potentially is provoking a retaliation from the Iranians. And we concluded, previous administrations concluded, it just wasn't worth it. What's really going on here is this. I think the administration is trying to provoke the Iranians to renege on their commitments to the nuclear agreement, which they've adhered to. And that's really what this is about, pressuring them provoking them to get out of the deal. If that happens, though, we're in a pretty terrible place, because then we're faced with this really bad choice between allowing Iran to get the bomb or actually taking action against them and maybe starting a war.
That is a terrible choice.
Not a good place to be.
Tony Blinken, thank you so much.